My name is Amy Fabick. I'm the director of the dining room here at Interstage Right. So I chose the dining room to direct. Regina Spain sent it to me and asked if it interested me. And she said, you know, it's kind of an interesting script. I don't know that it would appeal to everybody, but I think it might appeal to you. And so I read it and I just loved it, and I could really actually picture it from the first time I read it. Although interestingly, how it has turned out is not how I originally pictured it. It's so much better now than I had originally pictured it. So the dining room is about 18 different skits, scenes, that all take place in one dining room, which we are here right now, that is in the same house that has, you know, existed over time. And these scenes take place between 1930 and present day, and they follow all different families that have lived in the dining room or people that have visited the dining room. And it covers a myriad of topics from death and life to dementia, marital relationships and infidelity. It covers sexuality and parenting and bias, class issues, and it's what doesn't it cover really is probably more the question. The dining room is really funny. So when I originally read the script, I really kind of just saw it as drama. Words on paper, these scenes look super intense, and some of them actually are super intense. But when you're just reading the script, it appears to be far more dramatic and heavy. And so I went into it thinking it was a pretty heavy piece, and it is. It is. But there's a levity to it, and then there's like some of the scenes are just pure hysterical and ridiculous and all that. Also, it's not evidently it's not immediately evident when you first read the script. I think that life is really complex, and this show is very complex. And I think it's really fine to come and just laugh your butt off because the show is really funny. And then I think another time you could come and get a different message. So it's very human. So I chose to do this show in the round because when I read it, that's how I pictured it. I have done quite a bit of work in this place now, but my first show ever at ESR was Our Town, which was done in the round. And there is something very similar, not at all similar to Our Town. It's nothing like Our Town, and yet it is. Because again, like nothing really happens, right? People live and then they get an ice cream float and they get married and then they die, and those are just lifey things, right? And that's the stuff that happens in this show, right? They have breakfast with their family, or they get a divorce, or you know, they have a birthday party, they go to a family Thanksgiving. Those are the things that happen in this show too, like nothing and everything, right? Because that's what life is all about. And so I think when I was reading the script, I immediately connected sort of the spirit of that to Our Town, and maybe that's why I pictured it, but also because the star of our show is this beautiful, lovely dining room table. And I thought, what better way to make the audience really feel that they're part of the stories than to have them sitting around the table with the people. And so that's what they're doing. So yes, you could see the show every night and get a different experience, I think. In the round technically would mean that there would be audience on all, well, I guess a circle doesn't have sides, but there would be an audience surrounding the stage, or in the case of a black box, on all four sides. I did not do that because that's really hard on actors. But what we're doing is actually very hard on actors also, and this cast has done phenomenally with it. But what this means for our stage here is that we have half of the seats on one side of the theater and the other half of the seats on the other side of the theater. So if you're coming to see the show, you have the stage in the middle of the room, and then beyond them you could look at other audience members. I think a dining room is special because it epitomizes family, right? I mean, it's kind of where people gather. Maybe not so much anymore. And the cast, we've had conversations about that, about people and how we've grown up, and how that's been a part of some of our histories and not other people's, depending upon our ages and all that. But I think historically, a dining room has been where families sit and talk about things and gather before their day starts and gather at the end of their day. And I grew up in a very old house, a house probably very, very similar to our house that exists around our dining room here. I grew up in a house that was built in 1892, and it was very big and very old. And so, yes, we had a dining room, and we had a butler's pantry and a separate kitchen and all of that. Yeah, I have said all along that I feel like this show can be described in 3 adjectives: heartwarming and hysterical and heartbreaking. And I think my experience watching it over and over and over and over again as the director is that is consistently true. That I will be watching a scene and just laughing, and I laugh in the same spots every time. It's funny every time. And then all of a sudden there will be a line that's like kind of like a dagger, right? Or there's scenes that are very serious and very heavy. And then in there's this just very sweet gem of just really touches your heart, or is funny, because people are funny, like you said, in tough circumstances, and people are very multifaceted and complex, and relationships are complex. We've had a lot of conversations about the relationships in this show, and I'm thinking specifically about your relationship with your father toward the end of the show. Should I go into that, or is that?
You can, yeah.
And so this particular relationship, with Meg and her father, and she's in middle age and wants to move home with her children because she's gotten a divorce or getting a divorce, and then had a series of failed relationships as she tries to find herself, which is such a very common thing to have happen. And for several rehearsals, I was like, oh yeah, I don't blame the dad. I wouldn't let her back either, with what she's doing with her life. And then, and then for other rehearsals, I'm like, oh no, have compassion on Meg, and it just kind of changes. And I think that's exactly what happens in life, right? Like, nobody's all good and nobody's all bad. And we just make the best decisions we can as we're kind of, muddling through. So working with this cast has been probably the best experience I've had with a team, I would say. Certainly tied with maybe a couple other, noteworthy experiences. But when I put together this cast and sent out these letters, I was for sure certain that not everybody would take their parts, and I would just kind of make it work. But I was just so incredibly thrilled and humbled, actually, that I have the most unbelievable cast. So it's 12 people, 4 men, 8 women, playing these 57 roles, which sounds pretty crazy, and it is. The original script calls for 6 actors playing these 57 roles, but that's just, I think, too much. And that's just a recommendation. You can do it with 57 people. But 12 seemed like a good number. So this cast has been just exceptional about learning their lines and developing these characters, and really thinking about these characters. And so there's nobody in the cast that has under 3 roles. So everybody has at least 3, and some people have as many as 7 roles. And so you're not talking about working for 3 months on developing one character. You're talking about working for 3 months on developing 5 characters and their whole lives and their history and what makes them tick. And if you're going off stage for, 15 minutes and then coming back pretty much in the same costume as a whole nother person, you got to be pretty compelling. And these guys are. Like, you don't really get the sense of like, oh, why is Kelli back on stage just in a different sweater? There's never a time when I think that the audience is ever going to be confused about, one of the actors being a totally new person. They're walking differently, they're talking differently. It's miraculous, honestly. It really is. It's been incredible to watch, and we've had many discussions, and the cast has been very open to having difficult, I think, sometimes conversations about what's making their character tick and what their character thinks and feels. And there's been times when everybody else in the cast is like, oh, I don't know, I think this character thinks such and such. And the actor who plays the role is like, no, this is what, and then we have to defer because they have that connection. And sure enough, it always seems to work that they were right. So these actors, I think, have just put a tremendous amount of work and thoughtfulness and consideration into really presenting the very essence of what these characters are supposed to be. It's been pretty incredible. I have done a lot of directing and vocal directing here and other places. I do try to always learn something with every project because, I think that's part of how we grow. Here, I think in this project, I really learned to trust the actors because, just the sheer number of lines that these actors had to learn, and the complexities of these scenes that they had to work through, it was mighty. And I know I had a couple people say like, are you sure I can do this? And of course I was like, yeah. And so, yeah, just learning that people don't really take on more than they can do, and that they will come through for you. So just really learning to trust the actors and that they know what's best for them and their processes. So I think that's been a part of it. Because it's 12 distinct personalities, people have needed different things, and trying to leave room for and be flexible for people to learn and develop and grow in different ways. So if you haven't been to Enter Stage Right, I definitely invite you to come see one of our shows, because this is an amazing place. There's just so much magic that goes on here, and the minute you walk in, you're greeted like family, and just treated so warmly and so well. And the quality of entertainment and art that happens here is pretty incredible. We're in a small town, and it's, to me, very surprising that we would have a theater of this caliber here, that I think you would see in a much larger city. I would also invite you to come to see the dining room. I just think this show is so unique. I've never seen a show like it. I think if you're not a typical theater goer, you won't be bored, because it's funny and silly and goofy at times. And if you just purely want to be entertained, you will be highly entertained by this show. And then if you like to really think and like mull things over, and you like to feel stuff and like take things apart and like overanalyze like I do, then I think that this show will appeal to you even more, because there's layers. You use the word layers. There's so many layers, and I think you will go home thinking about some of these characters. And I would be very surprised if anybody came to the show that was not personally touched by at least one of these scenes, because this show covers absolutely everything that there is to be about being human. There's not a phase of life that isn't sort of talked about.